with me, then you're my enemy.
Only a Sith deals in absolutes.
Provided you've watched the previous lesson on polarity, you may now have a better understanding of the dialogue in that particular scene. It wasn't just a play on George Bush. It was to establish how Anakin had become polarized. Trying to explain these concepts and principles in a way that everyone can understand them within the limited 10-minute time frame that's given to me on YouTube initially is quite difficult. Now, I think I do a fairly decent job, but I do need to back up a bit because I need to emphasize the law of polarity. It really is key to everything else. No matter how experimental, complex, or advanced you think your magic is, it has to fall in line with the 7 Hermetic principles. And if it doesn't, it's not going to work. Everything comes back to the 7 Hermetic principles. The law of polarity being one of the main ones. I'm not saying that you can't do magic if you're polarized. Certainly you can. But it'll end up being a one-sided type of black versus white magic trapping that you'll end up falling into. There are many practitioners of magic who are polarized. You see it all the time. But the truly adept magician has depolarized himself. Now there is a flip side to being depolarized, and it has to do with the warning I gave you in the introduction. For those in neutrality have a difficult time relating to those who are polarized. While those who are polarized have difficulty relating to the opposite pole, those in neutrality have difficulty relating to either side, to either pole. Now we can have a far better understanding of those sides and what motivates and drives them, but you'll have a far more difficult time relating to it because you're not in that polarized state yourself. Now, talking to a polarized person a lot of the time is like talking to a 5-year-old. Certainly you can have a conversation with a 5-year-old, but you're not going to really relate to them unless you're around the same age. And you can understand where they're coming from because you've been there before at one point. But relating to them now is quite difficult. Am I alone in thinking that Anakin, during that entire saga, acted like a spoiled little brat child? Well, granted, in the first episode he was a child, but even then he acted more mature and grown up because he wasn't completely polarized yet. Now, you can't remove yourself completely from the poles, those terminals to the great electrical circuit. Otherwise, you'd die. Absolute neutrality is stagnation, and stagnation is death. So you can't remove yourself completely from the poles, but you can start to bring balance between the poles using the middle pillar ritual and grounding exercises and a host of other means. And this will begin to help depolarize you. Got to bring balance to the force? Yeah, it's in there. And if you don't think that George Lucas is a great magician, who else has manifested more material wealth for the least amount of work? Now, I could draw from various other movies, and in time I may, but Star Wars has the most Hermetic principles packed into it than any other, despite its cheesy sci-fi exterior. And plus, most people have seen it. So this is why they're always going on about bringing balance to the force. That force is within you, and it utilizes the law of polarity. And by balancing the forces between the poles, they combine to create their own unique state and perspective. See, everything begins with the perspective of the mind, the law of mentality, which eventually we'll get to. And since everything begins with the perspective of the mind, if you start with an unbalanced polarized perspective, then everything that follows will be unbalanced and polarized. I mean, this should make sense to people. If you don't like the things that somebody says or posts in a comment or on Facebook, you should ask yourself why you care. What does that mean to you? What threat is that to you? Who are they to get you all in a twist? Why the need to blurt out opinions to someone with the opposite opinion that isn't going to do very much good anyway because they're just as polarized as you are? And when you understand this law of polarity and you become balanced, it's easier to understand this whole process from the top down. And you're not really against anyone. I mean, at the risk of polarizing some of you even further, I'm not even against the Illuminati. I don't really care for the things that they do, but I can't really say that I'm against them because they adhere to the law of consent and contract. Who am I to interfere with your contracts that you consensually entered into? I have no business interfering with that. Now, you may think that they force things on you, but there's a maxim of law that says, let he who would be deceived be deceived. They're just playing a game for world domination. If you don't understand the rules of the game, well, whose fault is that? And you'll begin to see when we get into the law of consent and contract, when you start playing by the rules, their rules, and start turning them around on them, you'll see what a bratty, spoiled little Anakin child these corporate entities can become. They do not like that at all. But it needs to be done from a balanced position because they want you in conflict. They want you polarized. That's where they excel. See, if you're really so against the Illuminati, the first thing you should do is stop calling them the Illuminati. You're praising them when you say that. It means the enlightened ones. Well, who wouldn't want to be called that? Who do you think came up with that term? Or how about this one? The powers that be. Well, you're just reaffirming their position of power over you when you say that. Perspective of the mind. Everything begins there. The exercise I gave you 2 lessons ago about accepting or rejecting the thoughts that come into your mind plays into the law of consent and contract. And we'll cover that further down the road more extensively. But for now, I'm hoping you can understand the law of polarity a little bit better and see the necessity to strive to become more balanced and not feel this need to react to a differing opinion as if your entire existence is at stake. And this is another reason why silence is so important in magic. It's one of the first things you train in, so you know when to shut up and hold your tongue while you're in the process of depolarizing yourself. Silence is to sound what empty space is to form. The magical sigils that you'll create, the empty space around that sigil is just as important as the drawing of the sigil itself. In fact, that sigil couldn't exist without that empty space there. Well, the same goes for silence and sound, and why silence training is so emphasized at the beginning of learning to do ceremonial magic. It's part of becoming balanced, knowing when to hold your tongue and just let things go. A lot of people would be well served by talking less and listening more. And it's a key skill that one must have in order to be able to perform NLP in the art of persuasion. See, all these things tie into each other on many levels. And hopefully by now, you're able to understand the law of polarity better so that I can help bring you to the next level in the next lesson. See you then.